Welcome back to Our Canada, Our Future. We're talking about Canada's falling fertility rates with Rahim Mohammed at the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary. Now, Rahim, I wanted to play devil's advocate a little bit for you. You've expressed concern about falling fertility rates. I think a lot of people feel that way. But there are others that sort of say, why is this necessarily a problem? Why is it a problem if a country shrinks? So I was wondering, what is your response to that? What's so bad about our population maybe shrinking a little bit?
So as populations shrink, they place certain pressures on a country's economy. So younger workers tend to not only be more productive, but they tend to be more innovative. So it's the young kids in their 20s and 30s, that are starting Facebook, that are starting Tesla, that are responsible for not only a lot of the productivity gains in a society, but also a lot of the innovation gains in a society. So as a workforce becomes older, you have a number of pressures that are placed on economic growth, and they're coupled with the structure of most modern welfare states, which tend to cater to older citizens, as they should. But a lot of social spending is caught up in things like old age pensions, things like healthcare systems, which cater to older citizens. I think it's very important that people age with dignity. I think that's a very important liberal bedrock and a very important moral bedrock of modern society. But you get this vicious cycle where you have a smaller and smaller pool of productive workers that are supporting a larger and larger population of people who aren't working, people who are tapping in to social welfare policies and are reliant on social supports. And when you get into that situation, as we're seeing in countries like Italy, it becomes a politically and economically untenable state of affairs.
Right. Yeah, and I want to talk about Italy a little bit later on because you also wrote on that what's happening there. In terms of fewer workers, I mean, I'm guessing that really what you're saying is it's a matter of who's paying the bills. If you have more people who are retired and fewer people working, so for example, if you have 5 or 6 people working for every retiree, that has very different implications than if you only have two or three workers for every person who's retired. Correct?
Yeah, I'd agree. So in Italy, we're at the point where we have 2 people in the active labor force for every 1 retiree. So we've moved to a low fertility, low mortality society. I think it's great that people are living longer. My folks are both in their 70s. I hope they live forever. But we're getting to a point where that is putting a strain on our kind of modern welfare states.
Yeah, that's a problem of a prosperous society, right? People are living so long that we have to find the money to help support them in their older age. But I guess the interesting question then is, if this is a problem for a number of reasons, why are we not hearing more discussion about why does this seem to not really be on the radar in Canadian public policy? We don't hear a lot of discussion about falling birth rates. Why do you think that is?
I think, unfortunately, vocabulary surrounding fertility, vocabulary surrounding birth rates, it has been co-opted by these sort of racist, far-right, sort of great replacement type movements, these sort of white nationalist movements. So even, mainstream politicians are, I think, reticent to discuss the issue or touch the issue, because they're worried about being accused of using racial dog whistles or being accused of trying to cater to that crowd.
Interesting. So maybe, and we've got about a minute here, maybe you could sort of explain this replacement theory that we hear a lot of these white supremacists that you're talking about refer to. What do they mean by this? What's the sort of story that they're trying to tell?
So replacement theory, can be cloaked in a number of different garments. There are a number of different variations, but the general thrust of this family of theories is that there's some sort of nefarious conspiracy underway to exploit the difference in birth rates among white populations and birth rates among non-white populations to ultimately attempt to export a number of non-white communities to Western countries with the end game of making white populations in these countries a minoritized and marginalized population subgroup. So a lot of this is driven by demographics in one country. So specifically in the United States of America, If you look at the U.S.'s founding, at the time of independence, 16% of Americans were black. The United States took over about half of Mexico in 1850. So by around the middle of the century, the U.S. is expected to be a majority minority country. Demographics don't look like this in much of the West.